Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Episode 4 of the Fenway Faithful Podcast presented by Guy Boston Sports. I am your host, Anastasios Kilimos. They call me the Greek Freak. And today, we will be recapping Week 1 of the 2023 Red Sox season, which, as if you can hardly believe it, is already behind us. We are 1 week into the new year, and there is plenty to talk about. We will be diving into it right here. Let's get into the actual Week 1 of Red Sox baseball, starting off with the good. And the good is basically what we kind of talked about on my season preview special last week. The good was everything but the starting pitching for the most part. I think the biggest highlight of the first week, for me anyways, was the bullpen. And we said that coming into the season, the bullpen was going to be the biggest strength. I said it at least. I think Boston's bullpen was going to be the biggest strength of the team this season, and it was. I mean, absolutely, if it wasn't for the bullpen, Boston very well could have been 0-6 or 0-7 to start the season. The bullpen bailed them out in basically every single game this year. And, that's not really, like I said, it wasn't like I wasn't expecting that, because I was. That my expectation was that the bullpen was going to be our saving grace. And look, I thought it was going to be great. It was even better than great. Boston right now looks like they have a top 5 bullpen in Major League Baseball. Like, it looks that good. And the crazy part is that's not even at full potential, because with injuries has forced some of the guys in the bullpen to get bumped up to the starting rotation. Some of those guys in the starting rotation are going to be bumped back down to the bullpen, meaning, the bullpen could get stronger potentially. And which is crazy to think that as good as the bullpen is now, it could actually get stronger in a short amount of time. When Garrett Whitlock and Brian Bello come back, they're going to be pushed into the starting rotation. When that happens, my assumption is it's going to be Tanner Houck and Cutter Crawford, because they right now are, let's face it, they're probably two of the lower end starters we have, which, considering how bad this rotation is, we'll talk about that soon. It's pretty bad. Cutter Crawford and Tanner Houck are probably going to be pushed down to the bullpen. And listen, those guys as starters may not work, but I think as bullpen pieces, and I talked about this a little bit on the season preview special as well, as bullpen pieces, I think they work. As starting pitchers, I'm not so sure. But as bullpen pieces, I think Cutter Crawford and Tanner Houck work as long inning relievers for Boston, potentially, which could strengthen the bullpen. These numbers are crazy. The bullpen has been on another level. The only reliever that's kind of been, shit is Ort. And, Zach Kelly. Honestly, Zach Kelly's not that bad either. Here are some numbers from the bullpen. John Schreiber has a 2.00 whip and a 2.25 ERA. Pretty good. Zach Kelly, 1.71 whip, 1.93 ERA. Again, not bad. Chris Martin, who has been a real nice surprise, 1.25 whip, 0.00 ERA. Josh Winkowski, who I think has been the breakout star of this bullpen, with a .83 whip and a 1.50 ERA. He's looking like one of the best relief pitchers in baseball right now. And this is a guy who really, if you think about it, the only reason that he's even on this Red Sox roster is because of injuries. If it wasn't for the injuries to Brian Bello and Garrett Whitlock, Josh Winkowski probably isn't on this team right now. So it's pretty crazy. I think he has definitely so far played himself into a permanent roster spot in this bullpen. And I think it'd be crazy for Boston to send him down now. I don't think they will with the way he's been pitching. He has been by far, I think, their best relief pitcher this season. And then also Kenley Jansen, who has only made 2 appearances so far this year, but he has a 1.00 whip and a 0.00 ERA. When he has been called upon in the 2 appearances, he has been pretty good. So Boston's bullpen, like I said, pretty good all around. Really not anybody that's been performing really badly. Ryan Brazier, basically it, and Ort, they're the only 2 that have kind of been The rest of this bullpen has been rock solid, dominant, and they really haven't given up many runs. Pretty much all the runs given up this season has come from the starting rotation. The bullpen has been fantastic, and that's obviously a great thing. We like I said, I kind of figured it was going to be the strength of this team. Did I think it was going to be this good? Not really. I mean, I knew the potential was there, but this early for the bullpen to be firing on all cylinders, and to think this isn't even them at full strength yet. When they get Tanner Houck in the bullpen full time, and they get Cutter Crawford in the bullpen full time, I think it's going to be even better. So I love Boston's bullpen. It is definitely the strength of the team. It's been the one part of this team that has been consistent through the first week. Like, I'm going to talk about the offense in a second. The offense has had its moments. It's been great at times, but the bullpen has really been great from every game. Like, there really hasn't been a game where the bullpen didn't perform or they didn't perform up to expectations. So I'd say by far one of the best thing we've seen from Boston in the first 6 games has been the bullpen. Hopefully, if it stays like this, it's going to be a top 5 bullpen in baseball if it stays this way. It has been unbelievable to watch. And like I said, they have in pretty much every game this season kept them in it. Aside from like the Pittsburgh series, that's not because they didn't keep them in it. It's just the offense didn't come to play. But the bullpen has kept Boston in every game, essentially. You look at the Baltimore series in particular. I mean, the bullpen really, really helped save especially the first 2 games, the Corey Kluber start and the Chris Sale start, those first starts for them in Baltimore against the Orioles. If it wasn't for the bullpen, those things would have been ugly, ugly, ugly. And I mean, not to say they weren't pretty to begin with, because Boston gives up 10 runs in the first game and 8 runs in the second game. But without the bullpen, Baltimore probably has a field day and scores 10-plus runs in all those games. So credit to the bullpen. They are definitely the strength of this team. Even today against Detroit, you had a 3-3 game. Chris Sale gave up 3 earned runs in 5 innings pitched. And then the bullpen in 4 innings of relief gave up 0 runs. So kudos to the bullpen. This is a strong, strong bullpen, which is not, like I said, it's not really that much of a shocker. It's not really that much of a surprise because, again, we sort of expected the bullpen to be really good. It was sort of, it was, like I said, it wasn't a surprise. It was written in the stars that this bullpen was going to be good. They put a lot of work this offseason in improving the bullpen, which was a weak point in years past. It is now the strength of the team. Continuing on with the good, obviously the bullpen being the strongest of the things that went well for Boston. The offense, take away the 2 games against Pittsburgh, the offense has been humming all year. The Red Sox have scored 6 runs or more in 5 out of their 7 games this season. In 5 out of 7 games, Boston has scored 6 or more runs. That's pretty good, right? The offense, especially in that Baltimore series, they scored 9 runs, all 3 games, exactly 9 runs in all 3 games against Baltimore. They scored 6 runs today against Detroit. They scored 6 runs in that first game against Pittsburgh. Minus the 2 games against Pittsburgh, the last 2, Boston's offense has been firing on all cylinders. They've been consistent. They've been hitting a lot of home runs. Adam Duvall, when are we going to put his statue up? Is it going to be sooner or later? Because the way this guy's been playing through the first week, he has been Boston's savior. He hits a 3-run homer today against Detroit. Game tied 3-3. Smacks a 3-run homer. Gives them the 6-3 lead in which the bullpen, again, strength of the team. Bullpen hangs on. They win 6-3. Baltimore, the second game of the season on that Saturday game, hits the walk-off home run. That was, by the way, it was his second. He had a 2-home-run game, both 2-run home runs. But obviously the one that people are going to recognize is that walk-off over the monster. Duvall has just been raking. He's been such an important player for Boston in this first week. And like I said, that's now essentially 2 wins that he kind of pushed Boston to. Like today and that Saturday win against Baltimore, you can kind of hang on Duvall because he, a 3-run homer today, 2 2-run homers against Baltimore, including the walk-off. Adam Duvall has been incredible. But he's just one of the hitters in Boston has been off to a strong start. He is the best. He is the hottest player the Red Sox currently have right now. What he's hitting through the first 7 games is just absurd. He's currently batting 458. 458 batting average with a 536 on base percentage, 3 home runs and 12 RBIs, and I believe he has only played in 6 out of the 7 games. I think he only played 6 out of 7. But 458 with a 536 OBP, 3 home runs, 12 RBIs in just 6 games. It's pretty impressive what he's doing. He is the hottest hitter on this team, one of the hottest hitters in baseball right now, and he is definitely I think, saved Boston's start, because without him, that Baltimore game shakes out differently, and possibly this Detroit game shakes out differently. So kudos to Adam Duvall. He's been a huge part of this team's, the success that we've had early on has been credited to Duvall. He's been a great veteran signing, and I think the funny thing with Adam Duvall is that he kind of went under the radar, right? It wasn't, nobody looked at the Duvall signing and said, oh, it's a bad signing, including myself. I thought Duvall was a solid signing, but I think it kind of flew under the radar. Nobody really looked at Duvall and thought he was going to be a huge difference maker. I think people looked more at Justin Turner and Tristan Casas and Yasutaka Moshida. Did I just say Masataka Yoshida? Wow, that's a bad one. Masataka Yoshida. I feel like those guys were the new additions to the team that people thought were going to have more of an impact. And not to say that those guys haven't had any impact. In particular, Turner and Yoshida have had pretty decent starts to the year, but Adam Duvall has been far and away the best hitter this team has had through the first week of the season. And I just think that really surprised me, at least, is, out of all the guys you could have told me was going to have the hot start and bat over 450 and have 12 RBIs in 6-7 games, I probably wouldn't have said Duvall. I'd probably say, either Devers or Verdugo or really almost anyone but Duvall. I just, not that he's a bad player, I just didn't expect this out of him. So Adam Duvall, a very pleasant surprise for this team. But he's not the only one off to a strong start. I mean, Alex Verdugo, he had a very down year in 2022. Like I said, I believe it was episode 2 I was talking about it, or was it last week, where I said, listen, kind of everybody on the Red Sox had a bad 2022 season, Verdugo being one of them. So it's hard to look at 2022 and say, oh, Verdugo's a bad player and he's washed or whatever. He's less than 2 years removed from being an all-star in the American League. And so, yes, he had a down 2022 year and he definitely fell short of expectations. But I think Alex Verdugo, people were selling their stock on him way too soon. And look, he's off to a strong start this year. He's currently batting .333 with a .375 on base percentage through the first 7 games of the season. And he's kind of bounced between batting leadoff, which I actually think he's been very strong in the leadoff spot. I didn't expect Boston to use him as the leadoff hitter. He's actually been really, really, really good in that leadoff spot when they've used him there. And, he's had a great start to the season. He's been a consistent guy who can get on base for them. And, he's definitely looking a lot more like the 2021 All-Star version of Alex Verdugo, not so much like the 2022 disappointing version of Verdugo. And beyond him, Rafael Devers is doing what Devers is expected. He's currently batting .323 with a .344 on base percentage. He's got a couple home runs to his name. Again, Devers, and I said this on the preseason special, no one's really going to talk about Devers or say anything crazy just because of the fact that, what you're going to get. Nobody coming into the season was, overly talking about Devers. I think there was a lot of conversation around Yoshida and Turner and Casas and, other, Kike, other guys because, kind of unknown. You don't know what you're going to get. With Devers, I feel like everyone what you're going to get with Rafael Devers. He's the star of the team. There's a reason they gave him the massive deal, and he's performing up to his expectations. He's batting over 300. He's consistently getting on base. He's the best player on this Red Sox offense, even though Duvall has been the hottest so far. Devers all around is the best player this team has, and he's shown that so far. He's not having, of course, the breakout start that Duvall has had. But Devers is playing very well early on. He's playing just as well as we expected him to. And he's been a huge part of the team's success early on. So when looking at the good, really got to point to the bullpen and you got to point to the offense's production because aside from the 2 Pittsburgh games, the offense has been hot. There's been a lot of great hitting. You see that this lineup has power with guys like Duvall, Devers, Verdugo. Yoshida has flashed some power, This lineup can smack home runs, and they consistently are getting on base, which is good to see. So there is a lot of good that I've seen from Boston in the first 7 games of the season. So moving on to the bad aspect now, the bad aspect of the Red Sox, and that, of course, was the rotation, which we all said coming into the year, especially me. I was really hearkening on this in the preseason special. The bad really was the rotation. And I'm not, there's no sugarcoating it, especially in that Baltimore series, in that first game of the Pittsburgh series. Look, the rotation wasn't good. The rotation was not good at all. But I will say this. For as bad as the rotation was, especially in that Baltimore series, I do think it got better over the course of the Pittsburgh series. And in the first game against Detroit today, I thought Chris Sale looked a lot better today. So, although I think the worst aspect of this team in the first week was this rotation, I did see some things that got my hopes up. Because coming out of the Baltimore series, even though we won 2 out of 3, I was really nervous. Especially, and then after the first game of the Pittsburgh series, we're sitting there 2-2. We've given up at least 5 runs in every game. We get 10 runs in the first game, 8 runs the second game, 5 runs the third game, 7 runs the fourth game, and it's like, all right, and they're all coming from their starting rotation. None of those runs that we gave up in those first games were from the bullpen. Those were all the starting pitchers. Cutter Crawford got shelled. Chris Sale got shelled. Corey Kluber got shelled. Tanner Houck didn't get shelled, but he didn't have the best start either. And so the starting rotation, especially in those first 4 games, really, really hurt Boston, and it forced them to have to score an absorbent amount of runs. I mean, you saw they scored 9 runs in opening day, and they still lost. I mean, most baseball teams, you score 9 runs in a game, you're going to get the win. If you don't win by scoring, if you score 9 runs and you can't win a baseball game, you got real problems. Especially when the bullpen really didn't give up any other runs. It was all on Corey Kluber for the most part. And so that's where I think there are definitely some concerns still. Again, I do think like Nick Pivetta, I thought pitched pretty well. I thought Corey Kluber actually pitched a lot better against the Pirates in that second start of the season for him. He only gave up 1 earned run over 5 innings pitched. So he actually delivered a lot better. And Chris Sale, too, against Detroit today. I mean, he gave up 3 earned runs today, which is it is an improvement over what he did in the first game. So, although I think it is the worst aspect of what I've seen so far from this team is the rotation, I got to be honest, not as bad as I thought. Still bad, don't get me wrong. Rotation is still not a strength. It is the weakness of this team. Especially over the last 3 games, I am seeing improvement. And especially when you consider the fact that you have Garrett Whitlock coming back soon and Brian Bello coming back soon, that should give this rotation a boost and also the bullpen a boost. So, and in that regard, is it bad? Yes. But is it the end-all, be-all? Could still be. Like I said it in the preseason show, and I've kind of said it in the first 3 episodes of this show. This season lives or dies by the starting rotation. And so, it's still the truth. If this rotation it looks like it did in that Baltimore series, we are not going to win a lot of games. We got lucky. We shouldn't have even won the second game against Baltimore. That was I'm not going to call it a fluke win because Boston's offense did a great job and the bullpen did a great job. But if it wasn't for the outfielder dropping that ball in the bottom of the ninth, with 2 outs, we're singing a very different tune right now. Luckily, the Orioles' fielding was horrendous. Even that Sunday game, constantly just either dropping balls or miscommunications in the outfield. Like just the Orioles' fielding was a disaster in that series. And even in the Pittsburgh series, that first game, for some reason, fielders against the Red Sox in Fenway in those first 2 series really had a hard time. But they got bailed out. Duvall hits the walk-off, that's great, but if it wasn't for the fielding, that's another loss, and it's another horrible performance, by the pitching, from the starting rotation. Chris Sale, I think it was 7 earned runs he gave up over 3 innings pitched, 6 or 7 earned runs. So the rotation was not good, but again, not as bad as it could have been, because again, like I said, Chris Sale, second start, much better. Corey Kluber, second start, much better. Nick Pivetta, solid start. Tanner Houck, solid start. The only pitcher so far who hasn't had a chance to redeem himself is Cutter Crawford, who he got shelled in that first game of the Pittsburgh series. But the rotation, again, it was bad, but not as bad as I thought. Like, when I watched those first Baltimore games, I'm sitting there like, I even tweeted it. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of what I saw coming. Like, starters getting shelled, bullpen comes in, tries to save the day, and sometimes, like in the second game versus Baltimore, it worked. Boston was able to fight back. And even in the first game, they fought back. They just fell short. But especially in the last couple games of the Pittsburgh series, only 4 runs allowed in those 2 games, and then against Detroit, only 3. The thing is, though, to remember, and although we're like, all right, yeah, the rotation's getting better, we are playing 3 of the lower teams in baseball. And that's the concerning part, and that's why I still label this as, instead of labeling this as good, because you could, right? You could say, hey, Chris Sale got better in the second start, and Corey Kluber was better in the second start. And you know what? Pivetta and Houck had decent outings. Not great, but decent. This is actually not a bad thing. Even this isn't a bad thing. It is, and the reason it is because the best performances we've gotten is like a 3-run outing by Tanner Houck. And a 1-run outing by Kluber, which was good, but keep in mind who you're playing. Corey Kluber, 1 run over 5 innings pitched with 6 strikeouts. Pretty good. Well, except when you remember it was a home game at Fenway Park against the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are clearly one of the worst teams in baseball. And so that's what concerns me is like, all right, yes, we've had a couple of good games sprinkled in there and a couple of solid, average performances, but they're against bad teams. Now, what happens when we play an offense like the Yankees, like the Rays, like the Dodgers, the Braves, which are all teams that we play this year? What's going to happen then? That's my concern. It's like, all right, yeah, cool. Corey Kluber, 1 run over 5 innings pitched against the Pirates. That's awesome. There's a lot of pitchers in baseball who can put those numbers against the Pirates lineup, right? Baltimore is the best offense we've played thus far, and they shelled us. I mean, 10 runs in the first game, 9 runs in the second. 10 runs the first game, 8 runs the second game, and then 5 runs the last game. They scored 5 or more runs in every game. They scored a grand total of 22 runs over a 3-game span. It's an average of over 7 runs per game for Baltimore. Damn, did I just really mess up the math on that? I did. I'm sorry. 18 plus 5, 23, carry the 4. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been in school. But 23 runs, divided by 3, you're over 7 runs a game, close to 8 runs a game, really. Boston average giving up in that Baltimore series. And look, that's not good. And Baltimore, I hate to break it to you, but they're not one of the better offenses you're going to play this year. There's a lot of better offenses you're going to face than the Baltimore Orioles. And if that's the numbers you're putting up against them, and that's, by the way, again, that's with the bullpen being almost spotless. Right? That's like in the Baltimore series, in the second game against Baltimore, the bullpen only had 1 run given up by Zach Kelly. In 6 innings of relief, they had 1 earned run and like 4 or 5 hits in 6 innings of relief. That's the bullpen being almost spotless. And you still gave up almost 8 runs a game. That against the Baltimore Orioles at home, that's not good. That's where my concern is. It's like, okay, it was bad, especially that Baltimore series. Things got ugly at times, but you know what? Not as bad as it could have been. Corey Kluber in his second start was better. Chris Sale in his second start was better. But it's the fact that they even struggled in the first place when you're pitching against these lower tier teams. The fact that Cutter Crawford got shelled against the Pirates at home, the Pirates team that has been one of the worst teams in baseball over the last half decade. That's concerning. And the other thing in the bad before I move on to, what's to come is, look, the 2022 Red Sox came out to play a little bit here, and that is a bit concerning because 2022, one of the frustrating things, and I've heard other people talk about this, one of the frustrating things that we saw was this team never was in unison, right? What do I mean by that? Well, you'd have a game where the team would score like 6 or 7 runs, which again, in baseball, for an offense to put up 6 or 7 runs, that's a good game, a good performance. Offense puts up 6 or 7 runs, but the pitching gives up 8. You lose 8-7. Or, the opposite. The great all-around pitching game. The starting rotation was on point. The bullpen pitched well. You only gave up like 2 or 3 runs, but then the offense can't. They didn't bring their bats that day. They only score 1 run and they lose 2-1 or they lose 3-1. The offense is hitting well, they're pitching well, but the fielding, their defense, horrible. That I felt like happened so much last year, where there was never a game where everything clicked. Never. It felt like every game something fell apart, whether it was, the bats were cold that day, or the bullpen got obliterated that day, or the starting rotation only lasted 2 or 3 innings, and gave up 5 or 6 earned runs, or hey, these things were working, and then they had 2 or 3 errors and a drop ball and miscommunication in the outfield or something along those lines. That happened so much last year, and it is one of the reasons why Boston missed the playoffs last year and were as bad as they were, because the Red Sox last year were not an all-around awful team, right? They weren't the Pittsburgh Pirates. They weren't the Detroit Tigers or the Kansas City Royals or one of these other teams. Or the Oakland A's. They weren't a team, like the Oakland A's are bad at everything. Let's be honest. They don't have a good rotation. They don't have a great bullpen. They don't have a good lineup. That's the Oakland A's. But the Red Sox don't have that. Even last year, they had a good lineup. They had a decent rotation. Not great, but a decent rotation. The bullpen wasn't very good, but even at times, the bullpen had enough there that they should have been decent. Their fielding should have been decent. But it just never clicked. It never all worked together. It just constantly was like, every game, one unit was letting down another. It was either the hitting letting down the pitching, or the pitching letting down the hitting, or the fielding letting down both the hitting and pitching, or the pitching letting down the fielding, etc. and etc. That, to me, came out to play a little bit in this first week, and it does concern me. And look, every baseball team has things like that happen, but Boston last year in particular, they really struggled to ever be on point. It very rarely, and the one stretch of the season, like there was that 1 month, I believe, was it June or May? There was a month where Boston was like 16-4. They were the hottest team in baseball. Everyone thought, okay, they're good, and then they never got to that point again. They never reached that high. I believe it was May or June where they had that insane month where they were the best team in baseball. Only the Yankees were rivaling them at the time. And then they never found that again, because why? Because they never found that unison again. That month where they were red hot, everything was working. The hitting was well, the pitching was good enough, the fielding was great, and they won a lot of games. But the rest of the year, July, August, September, and October, they struggled to ever find that unison. They never found it, and it hurt the team. And I saw a lot of shades of that popping up in this first week, and it does concern me. All right, guys, finishing the show up here with what's to come. I'm not going to we've already gone a little long here, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But what's to come? Listen, we got to finish the Detroit series strong. We got 2 more games left in the Tigers series, Friday and Saturday, before we then switch on to Tampa Bay, which is going to be a very, very a difficult series because the Rays right now are, at the time of recording, are undefeated and are one of the hottest teams in all of baseball. So you go from a baby soft schedule to open the year with Baltimore and Pittsburgh and Detroit, and immediately have to go to Tampa Bay, and then you got to play the Angels, which is not going to be easy, and then you got to play the Twins, which is not easy, and the Brewers, which are one of the hotter teams in the league. You're playing 4 potential playoff teams here in the next 4 series, and so things are going to pick up and get a lot more difficult very fast, which is why I said it last week. Boston really needed to have a strong start, and I don't think it was a bad. We're 3-4 at the time of recording. We got 2 more games against Detroit to see what happens, but if they come out of here with if they come out of the Detroit series and they have less than 4 wins, if they come out like 3-6, it's not going to be good. You can't come out of 3 straight series against some of the bottom feeders of baseball, and calling Baltimore a bottom feeder kind of feels bad because They were actually better than us last year. They almost made the playoffs last year. They are a decent team. But let's face it, the Orioles, the Pirates, and the Tigers over the last half decade have been bottom feeders in Major League Baseball. And the fact that, we are struggling against them, even Baltimore, even though we took 2 games off of them, it took a fluke error by an outfielder to give us a win on that Saturday game. And then sure, on Sunday we played a great game, but that's it. And then, we beat a Detroit team that, honestly, we were neck and neck with them for the entire game until Duvall, smacks a 3-run homer. Adam Duvall, again, being sort of the hero of this team right now. They have to finish the Detroit series strong, because if they're struggling against these teams, it's not going to be smoother sailing against Tampa Bay or LA or Minnesota or Milwaukee or so on and so forth. So what's to come? They gotta finish the Detroit series strong. And then, look, I think there's no better way to kind of measure where this team is at in terms of talent, in terms of competition, than to have them play Tampa Bay. We're going to find out in that Tampa Bay series what this Boston team is made of very early on against Tampa Bay. And then we go right into the Angels series, and then right into the Twins series, and then right into the Brewers series. So Boston needs to finish these Tiger games strong and show some fight against the Rays and the Angels. That's what we got to see. We have to see the offense continue to hit the ball. They can't disappear like they did in the Pittsburgh series. We need them to stay strong. They don't need to score 9 runs a game like they did against Baltimore, but they can't score 1 run a game. Let's see a happy medium. Let's see the offense continue to click, continue to play well, and hopefully the starting rotation gives us some better efforts. Thank you for joining me. I will obviously be back next Friday to recap the remainder of the Tiger games, the Rays series, and the beginning of that Angels series. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow. We're trying to grow the channel as much as we possibly can, and make sure you support us. Hit a like. Again, I want to do mailbags. I want to be able to have an episode where we talk and answer questions and stuff like that. So if you're interested, leave a comment. Anything you want me to discuss, even Red Sox history. It doesn't have to be right now. Trivia questions, Red Sox history, all kinds of things. Whatever you want to discuss, I would love to do that. Obviously, if we get enough submissions, I would love to make a second episode every week and do that. So until next time, guys, enjoy watching Red Sox baseball, and we will see you later.